Okay, friends, before we get into the math of inflation on minimum wage, I wanted to show you those Zimbabwean banknotes that I've got. Here's a $5 billion banknote. Here is a $10 billion banknote. And my favorite is the $20 billion banknote. So these are three given to me by a former student when we were talking about inflation. There's actually one, these are worth, well, but they're worth what they're worth. When these were printed, these were worth exactly what is on them. The problem is, just like in the Confederacy during the Civil War and just like the country of Italy in post-World War II times, so much money was printed that it became worthless. The paper was worth more than the money that it stood for. What's hilarious is if you go onto eBay, you can buy $1 trillion Zimbabwean note, and those are actually worth more than these. I think because they didn't print as many of them, which proves the point of inflation. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you before we got too far into it. What we're going to look at now, though, is we're going to look at how this idea of inflation is exactly the same as our savings account math. And here's the deal. We're going to start by assuming a rate of inflation, for starters. Okay, we're going to make one up. By the end of the day, we're going to be solving for rates of inflation. But for right now, we're going to start by assuming one, just to get some math in the table. Let's just assume a 5% rate. Okay, so let's just assume a 5% rate of inflation. And it doesn't matter that that's not right. What matters is we put a number in there to talk about so we can see how the math works. Once we see how the math works, we can figure out what the inflation rate actually is. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, so in 1985, I'm going to put year, and I'm going to put minimum wage. But what we're going to do is we're going to be adjusting this for the 5% annual inflation as we go. So in 1985, we already looked this up. In 1985, it was $3.35. That's according to the Department of Labor's website. In assuming that inflation has averaged 5% per year, what that means is each year, the thing last year now costs 5% more than it did last year. I'll say that again. Whatever it cost last year, the new cost is 5% more than it was. For every dollar last year's thing has, this year's thing has $1 plus an additional 5 cents. And hopefully now you're starting to think like, okay, I see how this is exactly the same as investments. Because what that means is in 1986, I've got to take $3.35 and multiply it by 1.05. And I'm not going to do that on the chalkboard. We're going to do that in Excel in the next video. Because Excel, this is exactly, as we've had this discussion, what Excel is good at, is doing spreadsheets like this. To figure out what it would be in 1987, you've got to take what it was in 1986 and take 5% of that. Which was already, 5% more of that, which was already 5% more than it was in 85. So based on what we did last time with savings accounts, in 1987, this is going to be $3.35 with 2 multiplications of 1.05. Just like 2 years in a savings account. In 1988, hopefully you're seeing where this is going. In 1988, you start with that 335, and you end up taking 3 multiplications of 1.05. In 1989, it would be 4 multiplications. In 1990, it would be 5, and so forth and so on, until you get to 2015. And in 2015, you would have 30 multiplications, because it's 30 years from 85 to 2015. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at Excel and actually do this math in Excel, which is exactly what Excel was designed to do. See you over there.